How's it looking for tomorrow?
Yeah, one or two little minor problems, you know, injury-wise, but Turner's back. That's the big one, really.
Do you want to get him game time or?
Yeah. I think that would be wise, really. He's worked very hard in training and he's put the time in the under-21s. So to get him back before he finishes the campaign, I think is wise.
And obviously, you want to finish off with a win. But is it difficult to get teams motivated for this last game when there's nothing on it?
Well, I think you've kind of got to want it a little bit more, maybe, than the opposition. And that's what it probably boils down to, Rob, really, who wants to finish top half of the table. There's obviously not a lot between the two teams because after 45 games, we've both got 59 points.
They changed their manager as well. They had a lift when he first went in. Bottomed out now. I mean, do you see parallels or what? Two big clubs considered big clubs, maybe considered promotion contenders at the start of the season.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I know Nottingham Forest very well because that's where I was brought up. A family that have got season tickets and will be there tomorrow. It's a huge club. To compare it to Cardiff is a very difficult one when they've won 2 European Cups and FA Cups and Premier League title, or the old Premier League. So I mean, it's a huge club. But I don't think, going back to your question really, Rob, there's not going to be a lot between the two teams, and I do see similarities between the seasons both clubs have had, yeah.
Being honest, will you be glad to see the back of this season?
No, not really. Not really. I mean, there's still work to be done. I think do we need that summer break in terms of regrouping and looking at our targets for the summer? Yeah, I think we do need that, Rob. I think that's important. But at the same time, you know, be itching to get back and get into a new season, for sure, yeah.
Did you expect to be higher than you are now when you took over?
Yeah, I did, yeah. Yeah. I think you look from the outside and you see the amount of players that are here. But then there wasn't the partnerships that I thought there might be here. Players on the pitch, and there's a lot of players brought together with perhaps not enough thought put into them.
Is it fair to say really the hardest work starts when this game finishes, because you've got an absolutely massive summer ahead, haven't you?
Yeah, massive, enormous. We know that, but kind of knew that many weeks ago, many months ago, that would be the case. Everything was not going to be achieved. It was naive to think everything would be sorted and achieved in one January window.
What about the criticism? We've got to face it. You've come in for a lot of flack, and it's fair to say, not just the more publicity today, but it's fair to say that there are a lot of fans, maybe a majority of fans, still to be convinced you are the man. What do you say to them?
Well, I just think it's a question of understanding, I think, Rob, really. There are a lot of things that have also been sorted out at the football club, and at some stage you have to regroup as a football club. We've been able to do that in the Championship. There was talk, and you've talked about it. You talked about relegation, which I never saw, but you've talked about it, but that's not happened. So it was very, very important to stabilise the club. I think that's the point I'm making. So there's a lot of work that's had to be done to get into the situation we're in now. But now I think we're in a good position, or a better position, to move forward. And that's what I would say to the fans. We're in a better position now to move forward.
Do you understand the argument that the status quo can't remain and that something is needed to galvanise the fans again, because they had a year, yes, it was in the top flight, but it turned out to be one of the most horrendous years of the club. And then this year, when they expected, when Cardiff were in some rightly seen as favourites to go back up immediately, it hasn't happened, and if anything, it's deteriorated more. So, do you understand when people say it can't go on like this?
No, but my whole point is, it can get worse. It has got worse for some football clubs in the past. What I'm saying is now, I think we've got to a level now where we have stabilised the football club, and given the window, will be time to move forward again.
Are you convinced that you'll have the resources to move forward? Is this going to take... You and I talked about it this last week, and you said to me that you're equating more money with success, but clearly there's a big, you've tried, you've pruned a lot, but there's a big reorganisation to do, sort of restructuring of the squad to do. Are you going to have those resources? Well,
we're in dialogue, and we are obviously tracking our targets, Rob. That's all I need to say on that.
What I mean is, you convinced you'll have the fans will expect a promotion campaign next season.
Yeah.
And will you have the backing from the owner to do that?
Yes.
To sustain that?
Yes.
And the obvious question, it's a horrible question to have to ask, but I will ask it because everybody is asking it. Do you still feel you are the right man to lead this club next season, despite all the brickbats and all the sort of negativity towards you?
Yeah, I believe in myself, Rob, obviously. And I think the important thing is as well, there is a growing unity in the changing room. It's a strong squad together, a nucleus of a strong squad, which needs to be strengthened. We're trying to do that as a group, despite the criticism. We're trying to move forward, and we will move forward. And that's part of the challenge. That's the challenge that you've got to embrace. That's a challenge you've got to look forward to turning things around. It happens. This is football. It's not always going to be rosy.
Have you had so much flack as you're taking here in any other job?
You have flack from time to time at every football club.
So what do you do? How do you cope with it? Do you go home and not think about it, or do you read everything? Or I mean, press officers make managers aware these days of criticism flying their way. How do you cope with it yourself?
How do I cope with it? I just deal with. I prioritise things, Rob, and I deal with the things that are very, very important. Obviously, the most important thing is the players in my job and the staff, and ensuring that we're giving that direction and we're moving forward with that.
And just finally, on the sort of one of the major criticisms is that, to be honest, the football's boring. How do you respond to that?
Well, people will criticise Mourinho for being boring recently, and I know they're top of the Premier League, and it's different, but I don't see that. I don't agree with that. I think some of our performances recently, particularly away from home, don't think we've got it right at home, Rob, but away from home I think some of our performances have been decent and far from boring.
Russell, what were the objectives when you came in October? What were the objectives set out to you, and do you think you've met them?
Obviously, Chris, the objective was to try to turn things around, because it was a difficult situation the club were in. I think they were 17th, Chris, something like that. And to attempt to get in that top six. But when you looked at the club a little bit more deeply, which obviously I did, and I had that week actually before I took over, there were a lot of things that needed to be addressed.
I mean, you've sort of gone into them a bit more, but can you just spell them out for an issue of clarity? You talk about fitness, you've said partnerships with the squad, the bloke did squad a wage bill. Is there anything else that was, or am I correct in all those things?
Well, it depends how you. I mean, you see progress really, Chris. I mean, the last 11 games has still shown progress. I think the last 11 we've still won 5 of those, drawn 3 of those in our last 11. I think the critical period was January and December and January, where we only picked up, if you analyse and go back, we picked up about 5 points in those 2 months. But with that, there were also 3 months where we picked up 2 points per game on average. So there were periods when we were on track and we were hitting those targets. But the 2 critical months which were very disappointing for us were obviously December and January.
Do you think that you've still got the faith of the majority of the fans, or indeed if you ever had it?
Well, that's for them to decide, but should decide over a period of time, Chris, and I don't think, it's the right time. I think once we had a pre-season under our belts and we've had a summer and we have regrouped, then maybe that is time to have a look to see whether there has been significant progress made.
Do you think anyone else could have done a better job given the difficulties you said you saw when you came in?
Well, I can't answer that one, Chris. What I will tell you is I've done 710 games, and you don't do 710 games in this industry if you don't know what you're doing.
So those issues you touched on there, Russell, which you said from the outside, it was difficult to see. Were you aware of those when you took the job? Was there anything that you only became properly aware of once you were in position, or did you fully have your eyes open in taking the job that those difficulties were there?
Well, you have to find out, I think, in the end for yourself, don't you, and make your own kind of like judgment calls on things that needed addressing. And you don't, unless you're working day in and day out, some of those things you won't be able to identify even from a distance, even if you like inside information or knowledge. You will only find out once you're on the cold face as such.
I think that's some of the problem, Russell, is that you talk about the fans needed to understand. And
yeah.
There's some element there. But from the outside of that period, although the team was slipping off, they were still in and around it. It wasn't being spelled out as a disaster at that point.
What point, Chris, we're talking about?
When Solskjaer left.
Yeah.
And that period, I think the majority of people were disappointed in terms of they weren't challenging for a top 6.
Yeah.
Rather than the bigger issues. So, was it that in that such a state that things could have gone wrong very quickly?
There were just things that needed addressing, Chris, that weren't right, in my professional opinion.
Such as what, Russell? This is what.
Well, I've highlighted some of them. I'm not going to tell you everything, am I? But what I am telling you is the fitness levels of the football club were not at a level that was going to take the club forward, and statistically that was proved because we couldn't score a goal after 60 minutes when I arrived. So my first problem was that I needed to be in front for the first 60 minutes to get a result.
So you think, as a manager, as you well know, you said 710 games, you're the one that takes the majority of the criticism. Do you think the players have escaped too much criticism this year?
No, listen, falls on my shoulders. From the players' point of view, is they'll be the first to admit that there's not been the level of consistency in individual or collective performances which has got us where we need to be. Excuses are useless, and the numbers never lie, Chris. We're on 59 points. Nobody's making any excuses. Nobody's happy where we are. As a group, we think we have underachieved. Do we think we can do better? Of course we think we can do better. Given a January window to regroup, do we think that will be good? Yeah, of course we think that will be good. Do we think we can improve the fitness levels before we go into the new campaign and get that? There's a lot of planning gone into the pre-season to get that exceptionally strong and right and professional, so we can go off a good basis.
When you talk about that underachievement, Russ, I mean, when people look back over a season, they tend to assess, do a bit of self-assessment. They just ask, if you were to give both the players and yourself a marker of 10 over the course of the season, what would you sort of come up with as a score?
It'll be somewhere, we're in the middle of the table, won't it? So it'd be somewhere in that middle, wouldn't it? It'll be a 5. Might even nick a 6 if we win Saturday.
And are you talking about pre-season there? I mean, are you talking about trying to give the players one of the hardest pre-seasons they've had in their careers? Is that what it's going to be?
No, it'd be constructive. But we will try not to leave anything unturned. We'll look at every aspect of the individual. The screening that will go on for 3 days before we actually kick a ball, and the planning that we've gone into where we're actually away for a week where we won't even play a game. We'll be working morning, afternoon and evening on whatever we need to do.
Do you accept even now that next season you're going to have to make a really flying start to win back a lot of the fans?
Yeah, but that's not insurmountable, Rob, is it? I don't think anything's impossible. The season before, I went the first 8 games unbeaten. I won them all.
Will it take something like that again?
It might well do. It might well do. But I mean, a good start would be imperative. Obviously, to any campaign, if you're going to do well, you need to. I think you need to get off to a good start.